Hey everyone, it's Robin Lee with the Nexus Impact Center, and we are on day number 3 of sharing tips, hacks, and best practices for doing virtual events better. And today our topic is hybrid. So a lot of us are so ready to get back to live events, but the reality is there are a lot of people who are not, and it will be a while. So the hybrid event is where we have people live and we have people that are participating virtually. So before we talk about the 5 tips today, I want to remind you that you have been to numerous hybrid events your whole life, because you have probably watched a sporting event on TV where people are live, or at least they used to be, and you are watching. Or another example would be the New Year's Eve party in Times Square, people live and you're watching. And one thing about that is their experience is not totally the same. So our tip number 1 is that when you do a hybrid event, remember that you are really hosting 2 events simultaneously. And that means that you need 2 teams, one dedicated to your live crowd and one dedicated to your virtual crowd. So I think some of the hybrid events that maybe people tried to do, they didn't keep that in mind, and they just put a camera on to watch the live crowd, which definitely left the at-home people feeling like they were not catered to, or they might have even catered to the virtual crowd and the people live felt that way. So make sure that you have a dedicated team for each of those crowds so they can each walk away feeling like that the event was made specifically for them. So tip number 2 is to take that a little bit further. So if you're doing a hybrid event and you have 2 teams, then you need to pick a venue that is going to foster that. So you need a space where you can have your live people and, food and entertainment, if it's that type of event, or if it's a conference. That may be a little bit different setup, but then you also need your virtual team that may need a little more quiet and technology and a place where people can come in and do interviews and things like that. So make sure that you have chosen the right venue to foster 2 teams. That is tip number 2. All right. Tip number 3 has a lot more to do about marketing and setting expectations for your crowd. And unless you are 100% certain that you're going to be able to do your event live, then stop promising live. So some people kept anticipating this last year, and then they would convert it to virtual, and guests and participants got a little upset. So we don't know what is going to happen with the pandemic. We hope for the best, but there are different strains coming out. So we can't necessarily promise that with certainty. So my encouragement to you is stop promising live, and then you can surprise them towards the date of the event if you do find out you can go live or at least hybrid. All right, tip number 3 is if you do a hybrid event, then what you can do to, instead of just saying the first few people or however many people you can house get to come live, is either charge more for the people that come live, or if it's more of a fundraiser type thing, then maybe you would just invite your VIPs to come live. So it's a special treat to be able to come live. So that's those are kind of 2 more strategic ways that you can make it hybrid and decide who's going to be live and who's going to be virtual. All right, so that brings us to tip number 5. So we have shared that 80% of our event is the same whether we are virtual or live, but that means that 20% is not. So thinking about the 2-team concept again, this is where you need to consider that 20%. Maybe you are doing all of the same things, but you need to do them a little differently or at different times. Even if you have somebody on stage, like maybe you had a hypnotist on for some type of entertainment, they're going to be working with that live audience. And that's going to leave the virtual crowd feeling more like they're just watching the in-person crowd being entertained. So maybe you would flip some timing around so that the virtual crowd has time with the hypnotist where he's interacting or she's interacting with the virtual people while the live crowd is eating. So just consider where that 20% is different so that, again, you can ensure that both your live crowd and your virtual crowd feels catered to. So those are our 5 tips on hybrid today. Tomorrow, we are going to talk more about engagement and connection, specifically pre-event engagement and post-event engagement. Because again, one of the values of events is that connection and community with your attendees. So we will see you tomorrow to talk about connection.